Today, I want to talk to you about tap and go or contactless payments because more and more I'm starting to realize this is the biggest opportunity for merchant sales professionals and ISOs coming out of this coronavirus situation. And I'm obviously being optimistic as I say coming out of, but I think we all agree that at some point businesses are going to reopen. And so we're coming out of it. So what are these business owners thinking about when it comes to payment processing? So we're talking to business owners. They're starting to think about, okay, at some point we're going to open back up again. What do we need to do to get back to business? And I think small business owners are really grappling with the effects of this thing. What does it mean? How am I going to be able to accept payments? Am I going to be able to let people into my business? Am I going to have to dramatically adjust the operation of my business for another 3, 4, 5 months? Like, what does this all mean? And so one of the areas that merchants are starting to understand is that people are not going to want to touch physical objects that everybody else is touching. Okay, it's really not going to take a lot of convincing for you to explain to a business owner that if they have a dusty old terminal there that looks, greasy and 10 years old, most likely their consumers, their customers are going to have a little bit of trepidation before they go sliding their card into this nasty old terminal, which they're then going to touch again as they bring it out, or touching the pin pad, and all of these things because the coronavirus lives on surfaces. And so one of the big concerns I think that small business owners need to be aware of, if they're not already, is that in the area of payments, tap and go technology or contactless payments, which come in many different forms, this is going to be the new reality moving forward. We've already seen these shifts in big ways in other countries, and now I believe those changes are coming to the US primarily as a result of the coronavirus situation. So how do we leverage this situation to both help small business owners and also to enable us to grow our business and grow our portfolio? Well, before I dive into the details, I'm not going to talk a lot about statistics and all of this. I'm going to leave that to my good friend Patty Murphy, who just wrote a great article in the Green Sheet and who also we put out a podcast episode where she talked about this in the Insiders Report. So reference those two if you want to get a little more detail about the state of contactless payments. I'm going to kind of give you broad strokes and talk about sales tactics and strategies. So broad strokes, let's talk about contactless payments, all right? Right now today, probably about 60% of all the small businesses out there are set up for contactless payments, meaning they have a terminal that could support it. Okay. However, what we don't know and what there's no stats on that I've been able to find is what percentage of those small business owners actually are ready to take a contactless payment right now and understand that they're ready to take a contactless payment right now, okay? Same thing with American Express. It's always interesting how many business owners say, we don't accept American Express. Well, if you swipe an American Express card through their terminal, it works just fine in many cases because they had the file set up for Amex with maybe Amex.Blue, but they don't even realize they did that when they signed up with their last processor. In the same way, a lot of these new terminals that have been set up lately, they are set up for Apple Pay and Google Wallet and tap and go cards, but the business owner has no idea. And so when people try to pay with that form of payment, they're like, we don't accept that, and they don't even realize it. So we have no idea what that number is. From my personal experience, I think it depends a lot on geography. If you're trying to sell merchants in LA or Dallas or New York, you might find that over half of small business owners, maybe even as high as 60%, know that they can do contactless payments and they're already doing it, okay? So in those areas, the opportunity isn't quite as large. However, I'm convinced if you go to rural markets like where I live in central Pennsylvania, I doubt that in my market, 20% of small business owners are actively accepting contactless payments at this time. So what does that mean? What that means is we have several different ways we can approach this from a prospecting perspective. Number one, right now, it's a great thing for you to talk to merchants about over the phone. So reaching out to them with a pitch that makes them aware of this concern. I guarantee you there are plenty of studies out there you can find that talk about things like, for instance, people may be less likely to want to use cash because they start to realize, well, let's see, if I'm getting cash back, I know for sure that quarter was touched by at least 2 people. It was touched by the person that paid it, and it was touched by the cashier once when they put it in and once when they handed it to me. So that maybe is something that a lot of consumers are going to be a little bit fearful of. So potentially the use of cash could drop. Now, I don't really anticipate a significant drop in the use of cash, but it's possible. And more importantly, it's something that's certainly in the mind of the merchant as a concern that's legitimate, right? So, you need to explain to them, look, people are going to be using electronic forms of payment because they don't want to be handling cash that other people have touched. But then beyond that, they're not going to want to use the number pad on your device. They're going to want to use contactless payments, okay? How do we do that? Well, with contactless payments, there's a couple ways you can make it work. You can, of course, give them a terminal that's got, they have to turn the terminal around and tap it on the device that way. That's fine. You could also actually get a unit that comes out from the terminal. Maybe this is something where you want to sell terminals or lease terminals, something along these lines for contactless payments. So the first way to do it is over the phone. Reach out, make them aware of this concern, and then have a great conversation with them about the proper solutions to the problem and move forward with the sales process there so that they're ready to go. So when things do open back up in the coming weeks and months, they're ready to rock and roll. Number two, once things start to open back up in your market and you're able to get back out in the field and meet face to face, make sure your phone is enabled for Apple Pay. And make sure you have a tap and go card. So what you could do is, I'll just give you kind of an example of what I might do. I might walk into a merchant location and just randomly off the street and say, hey, how you doing today? I was out here checking on all of my customers, my merchant accounts, to make sure that they're enabled to take Apple Pay and these tap and go cards, because consumers are so fearful now of touching these pads, and they may not say anything, but a lot of times they won't come back to a business where they're concerned about, hey, I've got to touch surfaces everybody else is touching. So I wanted to check and see if you're enabled for that. I actually have a tap and go and my Apple Pay card here. Do you know for sure you accept both of these forms of payment at this time? And if they say, well, I'm not sure, okay, well, let's pull your terminal up. Charge me $1. I'll pay you $1 in exchange for just being able to check this out. Maybe even $2. $1 for Apple Pay, $1 for the tap and go card. Let's make sure both of them are working properly, right? So these are things that you can do right now and as things open up to really have a great opportunity. And it really kind of reminds me of EMV, where everybody needed these new terminals to take the new chip cards. I don't know if it's quite as big of an opportunity. It's interesting, though, because in some ways it's more of an urgent opportunity. It was a little difficult convincing merchants that this new EMV thing was really a requirement, and it was, but it was like hard to convince them of that. This is not going to be difficult to convince them of. This is a big opportunity because everybody's aware of the underlying issue and the underlying risk. So it's kind of a no-brainer that we need to take care of it. Maybe the percentages aren't quite as good. Maybe not quite as many merchants are without it, but I think you're going to find it's still a really big opportunity. So hopefully this is something that you can leverage in your market to help small business owners, to help the consumers and the spread of the coronavirus, and of course, as always, to sell more merchant accounts. My name is James Shepard. Have an awesome day.